When your students are going to a competition, an evaluation, or a festival, do they understand the rules of the event when they're going in? In athletics, everybody knows the rules. You know, if the ball goes into there, then they get a certain number of points, whatever, and the intricacies and everything. Like everybody's aware of the rules or whatever. But if you just start surveying music students who are coming out of the sight reading room or coming out of the auditorium and say, hey, what are the rules of this event? Would they be able to articulate the rules to you, and would they be able to know how they scored based on what they just did? I think it'd be really helpful if all parties involved, the judges, the directors, the students, if after the performance was over, they had enough information to be able to figure out what score they were going to get. And I understand if there's like a rank order competition where, they have rank 1 through 5 or whatever, they might not have listened to everybody else play. But if it's a graded competition, like 1 through 5 or A through F or whatever, they should have an idea about how they just played and what grade they're going to receive based on their performance. Here in Texas, we have something called the University Interscholastic League, or UIL for short, which is sort of the governing body that sets up the rules of our concert and sight reading competitions. And they publish all of the information online. You can go and check out the rubric and check out the Form 4 and see which criteria your ensemble will be evaluated upon and how you will fit into the grading based on a certain set of conditions in the rubric. If you're not from the state of Texas, but you come to Texas to play in a festival or something along those lines, the adjudicators they're likely to hire are likely to be from Texas, and they're likely to be members of TMAA, the Texas Music Adjudicators Association. And those, you have to have a TMAA membership in order to judge in a UIL concert and sight reading competition. So what I'm getting at is that you're likely to be judged by the same standards in any festival or competition situation within the state of Texas. So it might be helpful to know those rules. For orchestras in the state of Texas, articulation is referred to in 4 different places. It's referred to, and this is, of course, at the time of this recording, it's referred to in the 2020 concert rubric under the technique for the classification area, and they refer to articulation as being appropriate or inappropriate within the rubric. In the sight reading rubric, the language is identical. In the Form 4, we see the word articulation used in a couple places. In one place, it indicates whether or not the articulation is appropriate. And then right below it, there's a section that talks about slurs and ties and articulation markings and whether those are being observed. So we have 4 different indications of articulation in our concert and sight reading evaluation according to the UIL adjudication materials. We have 4 mentions of how the note is supposed to begin, and we have 0 mentions about how the note is supposed to end, which I find to be interesting because it's really quite easy to make an ugly release on a string instrument. But that can be addressed in other areas. That could be addressed in the tone area, the style area of the sheet, if the releases aren't going well. But along the same lines, with articulation, if the articulations aren't being addressed, it's not just going to be those 4 instances that I just mentioned where the ensemble is likely to suffer. There's a lot of other areas as well that the ensemble is likely to not do well in because of poor articulation. If your articulation is muddy, are your students likely to play with great rhythm? If you're playing, for instance, let's say you're playing on the string in the allegro section of Tchaikovsky's String Serenade, are you likely to score highly in the style category? So it's not just about the articulation. The articulation is going to affect a lot of other domains as well. So even though it's only referred to 4 times, if your students aren't articulating, you're not likely to do very well. I hope I've made a great case for the importance of articulation, even though the UIL materials might not address it so heavily. I think that it encompasses a lot more than just the scope of whether or not articulation markings are observed or whether your articulation is appropriate for the classification. I think that your articulations are going to make or break other components of the rubric as well, and I mentioned a couple of those earlier. So I hope that the information in this articulation series is useful in not just to score points in those areas, but to also enhance the overall sound of the ensemble, make the rhythm sound clear, make the style pop, make the tone rich. All of these can be addressed through articulation. So I hope you find this information helpful, and I hope that you can use it to help transform the sound of your ensemble.